There's a moment most people have had at least once. You're going through something, not a crisis, not a breakdown, just something heavy. And you reach for your phone. You open your contacts and you start scrolling, looking for someone to call, and you keep scrolling. Not because you don't have people. You have a full contact list, a group chat, a family, co-workers who know your coffee order. But in that specific moment, you can't land on a name. Because you're not sure who actually wants to hear this. Who would be genuinely glad you called? Who would make you feel less alone rather than, in some way you can't quite explain, slightly more alone for having reached out? Most people find a name eventually, but that pause before they get there, that's worth paying attention to. Because what lives in that pause is one of the most important questions a person can ask, and most people never ask it directly. Who actually cares about me? Not who says they do. Not who shows up when it's easy. Who actually, in the way that costs something, cares? The measurements most people use to answer that question are the wrong ones. Frequency of contact. Warmth. How good you feel in their presence. Whether they say the right thing at the right moment. These feel like reasonable signals. Some of them are, but they're also easy to produce without much underneath them. Warmth is cheap. A kind word costs nothing. And the people most skilled at making you feel good in the moment are not necessarily the ones most invested in who you actually are. In fact, and this tends to land like a quiet punch, it can sometimes run in exactly the opposite direction. In the late 1990s, Shelly Gable, a psychologist at UC Santa Barbara, began studying how people in close relationships responded to each other's good news, not bad news. Good news. Bad news is the obvious test, and most people pass it with basic social decency. They show up. They say the right things, because not doing so looks bad. There's social pressure to perform. But your good news? There's no pressure there. Nobody looks bad for letting it slide. So, Gable studied what people actually did with it. She found 4 patterns. Active, constructive. They engaged fully. Asked questions. Wanted the details. The good thing was allowed to take up space. Passive, constructive. They acknowledged it warmly, then moved on. That's great, anyway. Passive, destructive. They barely registered it. Changed the subject. Made it briefly about themselves. Active, destructive. They introduced a complication before you'd finished your sentence. But have you thought about what happens if people whose partners responded actively and constructively showed significantly higher intimacy, trust, and relationship satisfaction over time? The effect was stronger, Gable found, than the effect of responding well to bad news. Because bad news creates obligation. Good news reveals choice. What someone does with your joy when they're under no obligation to do anything, that's close to the truth. Think about the last time you shared something good. Really shared it. What came back? There's a second test. Harder to run in the moment. Clearer in retrospect. Look at when care costs something. Not the easy gestures. The check-in text, the comment on the post, the quick thinking of you. These take 30 seconds. They feel good to receive. They tell you almost nothing about what's underneath because they require nothing to produce. Look for the moments someone gave something up to show up for you. Time they didn't have. A call they made when they would have preferred not to. A hard thing they said. Not to wound you, not to settle something old, but because it was true, and they thought you needed to hear it, even though saying it was uncomfortable for them. In evolutionary biology, this is called costly signaling. The signals that require real sacrifice from the sender can't be faked, because faking them is too expensive. A gesture that costs nothing is unreliable information. A gesture that requires the other person to give something up carries weight precisely because of what it demanded. Think through your closest relationships right now. Who has told you a hard truth in the last year? Not cruelly, plainly, because they cared enough about who you're becoming to risk the discomfort of saying it. That list is usually very short. Roy Baumeister, a psychologist at Florida State University who has spent decades studying the conditions under which people feel genuinely known, found that real closeness isn't built on agreement. It isn't built on someone who mirrors you, validates your instincts, and keeps affirming your existing direction. It's built on someone who knows who you said you were going to become. Picture a specific kind of conversation. You're talking to someone and they ask, not as small talk, but with something behind it. Whatever happened with that thing you mentioned a few months ago? The project, the decision you were scared of, the thing you said you were going to change, they remember it. And the question carries weight because there's a version of you they've been quietly tracking. And they're checking whether the person in front of them matches it. That feeling, being held to something, is slightly uncomfortable. It can feel like pressure, and so people sometimes move away from it, toward the easier warmth of someone who asks nothing, notices nothing, requires nothing. But what they've moved toward is comfort. What they've moved away from is someone who was genuinely invested in them. Those are not the same thing, and we spend a lot of our lives confusing them. The difficult part of all this is what it requires you to honestly look at. Because if you run these questions on your own life, who made real space for your good news when they had no reason to? Whose care has ever cost them something real? Who holds you to what you said you cared about? Some of the people you've been calling close will quietly fail. Not because they're bad. Most of them aren't. They're offering connection as comfort. And comfort is real. It just isn't care. And some people further out will surprise you. The one who calls infrequently but asks the question you didn't expect. The one who said the uncomfortable thing 2 years ago and turned out to be right. The one who remembered something you shared almost in passing and followed up on it weeks later when there was no occasion to. James Pennebaker at the University of Texas at Austin spent decades studying how social support actually functions. His finding: the most powerful thing another person can do for you isn't fix your problem or produce the correct response. It's to be genuinely curious about your experience, to ask the question that opens something rather than closes it, to make you feel, not in the performative sense, in something closer to the cellular sense, that what's happening to you actually matters to them. Not many people do that. The ones who do tend to be quiet about it. They don't announce their care. They just keep showing up in small, specific ways that require you to actually pay attention to notice. Most people spend their lives asking some version of the same question: am I loved enough? The more honest version is simpler and harder. By whom, actually? Who responded to your good news like they wanted more of it? Whose care has ever cost them something real? Who told you a hard truth when silence would have been easier? Who has been quietly paying attention in a way that has some traction on you? Not because the moment demanded it, not because it benefits them, just because somewhere along the way you became someone they were genuinely tracking. That's a shorter list than most people want it to be, but it's the real one. And if you're on someone else's short list, if there's a person out there who would answer those questions with your name, that's not a small thing to be. That's the whole thing. Human, after all.